Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today we're diving deep into the world of Vikings. You know, those Scandinavian pirates who have fascinated and terrified people for centuries? Yeah, those guys, they were brutal, they were bold, and they sure knew how to rock a beard. But there's a lot more to these legendary warriors than just raiding and pillaging. How much of what we've seen in movies and TV is actually true? Today, we're going to separate fact from fiction. Get ready to have your mind blown, folks, because we're about to uncover 10 things you probably didn't know about these legendary seafarers. Alright, so, first things first. The Vikings weren't just bloodthirsty barbarians hell-bent on conquering the world. Yeah, they were known for their raids, but their daily lives were actually much more complex than that. These guys were skilled farmers, fishermen, and traders too. They had families, they had communities, and they had to figure out how to survive in some pretty harsh conditions. You can't just be out there pillaging and plundering all the time. You need to eat, you need a roof over your head, and you need to trade for goods you can't produce yourself. The Vikings understood this, and they were actually very skilled at these more peaceful pursuits. They were experts at farming in difficult climates, using innovative techniques to make the most of the land they had. And when it came to fishing, they knew those northern waters like the back of their hands. They established vast trade networks that stretched all the way from North America to the Caspian Sea. So yeah, the Vikings were fierce warriors, but they were also practical and resourceful people who knew how to make a living in a challenging world. Now let's talk about the Viking Age itself. It wasn't some endless era of Scandinavian dominance, you know? It actually lasted for a relatively short period of time, from around 793 AD to 1066 AD. That's less than 300 years, folks. Some historians believe that overpopulation and a shortage of resources in Scandinavia might have driven them to seek new lands. Others point to the relative weakness of their neighbors at the time, making them easy targets for raids. And let's not forget about their incredible shipbuilding skills and advanced navigation techniques. The Vikings built these incredibly seaworthy ships called longships, which allowed them to travel vast distances and navigate rivers and open seas with ease. But like all good things, the Viking Age eventually came to an end. A number of factors contributed to their decline, including the rise of stronger kingdoms in Europe and their gradual conversion to Christianity. The point is, the Viking Age, while impactful, was a relatively short chapter in history. Alright, let's talk about something you might not expect: Viking law and order. You might think these guys were all about chaos and mayhem, but they actually had a surprisingly complex legal system. Their legal system was based on a combination of oral tradition, social customs, and something called things. Things were assemblies where free men would gather to discuss matters of law, settle disputes, and make important decisions for their communities. Imagine it like a big town hall meeting, but with a lot more beards. At these things, people could bring their grievances before the assembly, and the assembled men would hear arguments and render judgments. They had laws governing everything from property disputes and inheritance to personal injury and even murder. Viking justice could be pretty harsh by today's standards. They believed in the concept of eye for an eye, so punishments were often severe and designed to fit the crime. But the point is, they had a system in place to maintain order and address wrongdoing. Chapter 4. Masters of the Waves. Now, let's talk about something the Vikings were undeniably awesome at: shipbuilding and navigation. These guys were the ultimate seafarers of their time. They built these incredible ships called longships, which were designed for both speed and maneuverability. These longships were technological marvels for their time. They were long, narrow, and incredibly lightweight, with shallow drafts that allowed them to navigate rivers and coastal waters with ease. They were also equipped with both sails and oars, giving them flexibility and speed in various conditions. The Vikings were also expert navigators. They sailed across vast distances using the stars, the sun, the wind, and even the waves to guide them. Imagine sailing across the open ocean with no GPS, no compass, no charts, just your knowledge of the sea and the sky to guide you. Chapter 5. The Dark Side of Viking Raids. Okay, we've talked about some of the more impressive aspects of Viking culture, but it's time to address the elephant in the room: slavery. The Vikings, for all their skills and innovations, were also involved in the slave trade. During their raids, they would often capture people from the communities they attacked. These captives, known as thralls, would then be forced into servitude, working as laborers, servants, or even concubines. Now, slavery was a common practice in many parts of the world during this time period, so the Vikings weren't unique in this regard, but it's still a dark stain on their legacy. The slave trade was a significant part of their economy. They traded thralls for goods, wealth, and influence, perpetuating a brutal system that caused immense suffering. The Vikings were complex people, capable of both great and terrible things, and their involvement in slavery is a reminder that even the most fascinating cultures can have dark underbellies. Chapter 6. Gods, Monsters, and Ragnarok. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about something a little more mythological. The Vikings had a rich and complex belief system full of powerful gods, fearsome monsters, and epic tales of creation and destruction. They believed in a pantheon of gods, each with their own unique personalities and domains. There was Odin, the Allfather, god of wisdom, war, and magic. Thor, the god of thunder, who wielded the mighty hammer Mjolnir. Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. And Loki, the trickster god who was always stirring up trouble. Their mythology is full of epic battles, grand adventures, and profound lessons about life, death, and the fate of the universe. Their myths and legends weren't just stories, they were deeply intertwined with their daily lives, influencing their values, their social structures, and their understanding of the world around them. One of the biggest misconceptions about the Vikings is that they were this unified, homogeneous group with a single leader and a shared purpose. In reality, the Vikings were incredibly diverse. They weren't a single nation, but rather a collection of various tribes and clans, each with their own leaders, customs, and allegiances. Saying Viking is kind of like saying European. It's a broad term that encompasses a lot of different cultures and identities. Some Viking groups were primarily focused on raiding and warfare, while others were more interested in trading and exploration. They spoke different dialects, had different customs, and often fought amongst themselves just as much as they fought outsiders. There was no single Viking empire or Viking king that ruled over them all. Chapter 8. From Scandinavia to North America. Now we all know the Vikings were incredible seafarers, but their reach extended far beyond just coastal raids. These guys were explorers, and they established settlements all over the place. We're talking about England, Ireland, France, Russia, Iceland, Greenland, and even, believe it or not, North America. That's right, folks. Long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, the Vikings had already set foot on North American soil. They established a settlement at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000 AD. These Viking explorers were pushing the boundaries of the known world, venturing into uncharted waters and leaving their mark on distant shores. Their voyages and settlements had a profound impact on the course of history, shaping the cultural and genetic makeup of the regions they explored. Chapter 9. Viking Women, Breaking the Mold. Let's talk about Viking women for a minute. Now, life in the Viking Age wasn't exactly a walk in the park. But compared to other societies at the time, Viking women enjoyed a surprising degree of freedom and rights. They couldn't vote in the things, but they could own property, inherit wealth, divorce their husbands, and even participate in trade. In a society where survival often depended on physical strength and resilience, Viking women were tough, resourceful, and essential to the functioning of their communities. They were far from the meek and subservient figures often depicted in popular culture. Chapter 10. Busting the Horned Helmet Myth. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the horns on the helmet. Contrary to popular belief, there's absolutely no evidence that Vikings ever wore helmets with horns. Not a single one. This image of the horned Viking warrior is a complete fabrication, popularized by 19th century Romanticism and opera costumes. Actual Viking helmets, the few that have been found, were simple, practical affairs, designed for protection, not for fashion statements. They were typically made of leather or iron, and they might have had a simple nose guard, but no horns. Some historians speculate that it might have originated from ancient Greek or Roman descriptions of Celtic and Germanic tribes who sometimes wore horned or winged helmets for ceremonial purposes. But when it comes to the Vikings, the horns are a big fat myth. Outro. Thanks for exploring. Well folks, there you have it. 10 inconvenient facts about the Vikings that might have shattered some of your preconceived notions. These legendary warriors were more than just brutal raiders, they were complex, skilled, and surprisingly sophisticated in many ways. They were farmers, traders, explorers, and storytellers. They left an indelible mark on history, influencing the course of civilizations and expanding the boundaries of the known world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Viking history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more mind-blowing content, and leave a comment below telling me which facts surprised you the most. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that Viking spirit alive.